Yeah, so in theme with this episode, I pretty much forgot how to work my tech. And then ultimately, my wife walked by and said, "Hey, try restarting it." And here I am.
Hey, I found his dad!
I think Dad has made some excellent progress today.
Your dad, he's a fun guy, right?
And I love him so much, and I think he's the greatest dad in the world.
Welcome back to the Working on the Dad Pod. I'm Alex. He's Ethan. Better late than never. We don't stream this live, so none of y'all knew that he showed up, 15, 16 minutes late. That's okay. But as someone who works in tech myself, number of times that turning it off and back on again has actually successfully worked. Fairly incredible. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
Today, we are talking about getting older. As we shared on the last episode, I was having a birthday that happened on Monday. And so I'm now a year older. And to put it in perspective, Ethan and I are now both 36 years old. We met when we were 18 years old, which means we've known each other half our lives.
You know what? I did not realize that till you just said it, and that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sucks.
So, when you think of your college buddies in your 20s and even your early 30s, it's sort of like not like, oh, the people you grew up with, your childhood friends, but mathematically, not to the day. We met in the fall when we were 18.
Sure.
I'm not going to do the math, especially not right here, right now.
No.
But yeah, we met when we were 18. We're now 36. So we've known each other half our lives. And so that had me
don't like that
podcast. Yeah. I mean, I do. It's been a wonderful friendship.
Sure. Obviously, yes. Being your friend for literally half my life has been great, but realizing that it has been half my life I don't like that. Don't like it at all.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to be a downer on that little tidbit, but that had me thinking at least about getting older. And there are a lot of little things that I feel on a day-to-day basis. I feel being a dad, right? That I thought I was young, right? I still feel pretty young. I feel pretty able, but I think there's a lot of things that we can get into that being a dad and just being in your mid 30s. So even if you're an expecting dad, there are plenty of people who don't have kids and don't start having kids until now or even later sometimes. And so that is just something that we have to deal with and manage on a lot of levels. But some of the things that I do, some of the things that Ethan does to maybe combat aging. If any of you are aware of Brian Johnson, we're not going to stream into that territory. He is a multimillionaire, maybe a billionaire, something in tech, but he is basically on this journey to constantly make his body younger and live forever. We're not doing any of that kind of stuff, popping like 60 different pills and doing all sorts of different light exposures and all sorts of weird stuff. But before that, we'll have story time. After that, we will work on the dad bod. Just a general, Ethan, how you doing, man?
I've been better. This has been a tumultuous time at work. Just for anybody who follows the news, lots of changes. I won't get into the specifics, but there's a lot going on. I've got a lot of big decisions to make about my own future and how that impacts the future of not just my family, but in some cases the future of the country and the world. But there's a lot going on, and it's it kind of leads me into my story time for this week. And earlier this evening, my stress kind of got the better of me, and it resulted in not my finest moment as a dad. Both of my we have 4 new milk cups for my 2-year-old. However,
Sure.
On the nights that my 5-year-old also wants milk, it is a straw cup, and sometimes she just likes to have some milk before bed. It's fine. She's potty trained. She knows how to get out, whatever. And the one that my 5-year-old used last night was still in the fridge and clean enough for a second night of use. And
done that many a time.
Yeah, so the other 3 were dirty, and I didn't feel like washing all 3, which is what led me to having the other 3 being dirty. So I asked the 2-year-old, which one do you want? My 5-year-old wanted the one that I offered to my 2-year-old, and of course my 2-year-old said she wanted that one too because the 5-year-old said it first. And I explained, hey, I wasn't asking you, you're just using the one you are using that time. And then that set off a nuclear arsenal of big feelings and emotions and her yelling at me and screaming. And I said, hey, like, you do not act like this over a cup. You are very excited about your pajama party at school tomorrow. And if you flip out over this cup, you are going to go to school in regular clothes, and that's going to be it. She went absolutely ballistic. She started kicking and screaming on the floor, and my wife was video chatting with our nephew and niece, and she was making this big thing, and I came out of the kitchen and I just said, stop. And then she didn't stop, and she yelled, and then I yelled back. And then at one point I did my super angry yell that caused her to start crying, which then, caused the little one to cry. And I happened to have a dish towel on me, and I just hit the banister with the dish towel in a moment of rage. No one was near me by 10 feet, but I got out on the poor wooden banister who just happened to be near me. And then the 2-year-old really started crying, saying, that scared me. I don't want daddy to do that. And then my wife yelled at me, and I yelled back at her because I was embarrassed about my actions, which is where my 5-year-old gets it from. And, got to the point where my 5-year-old was sent upstairs by my wife to calm her feelings. The 2-year-old came into the kitchen where I was seating, and she said, I really don't want daddy to do that. And my wife asked her, do you want to stay with daddy or go with me to talk to your older sister? And she said, I want to stay with daddy. And then we were both rubbing each other's backs while I was holding her, trying to calm each other down. And, a few times tonight I had to tell her that I was sorry and that I won't do that again. And that I'm sorry I scared her. Of course, my older daughter and I made up, but she still has some big feelings. So we'll see how she is in the morning, if she can earn back pajama party time. But it was not my best night as a dad.
Yeah. Doesn't sound like it. I don't have a ton of reassuring words other than, it's a you'll get them next time.
Hope so.
The learning moment, a moment you can, take away from. And apologizing is always the right answer there. And so I hope it works out. I have not been immune to those kinds of outbursts like you. My oldest gets my temperament and my temper, and things can escalate quickly. And I've made a concerted effort. That doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I've made a concerted effort to flip a switch. And especially when I'm talking to her, and it's helped me out in other avenues of life, but going the opposite, right? I have found my solace in the calm. And that's weird for me because I used to be the one that's like, you want to yell at me? I can yell louder. I can be scarier.
Mm-hmm.
And then it ends up 5 minutes later, you're like, man, I don't feel good about that. So I get it. But yeah, I've really tried to do a thing when she starts yelling at me. My wife and I both just look at her and go, nobody's yelling at you. Nobody's talking to you like that. We're not going to have that kind of conversation with you. That doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm.
But it sets a standard for our, like, it doesn't necessarily like calm her down.
Sure.
But I started realizing that like calming her down in the moment shouldn't necessarily be the goal. That making sure that I don't escalate it and make it worse has to be the first goal. And that she'll regulate eventually, but that learning to regulate and meet other people where they're at in the sea of normal is the better learning journey. But it's when you got a lot of stuff going on in your life, and I you don't have to go into it for our listeners, but I know what you got going on, and I know that it's stressful, and I know it's not, somebody cut you off in traffic kind of stress. It's not, there's just a big project with a deadline kind of stress. So I get it. And so I'm sorry for that. And I'm sorry that it boiled over. I'm going to completely switch gears for my story time. I have something positive. So
great.
One of my best running bits or routines on this podcast is finding great social media content and forgetting who I saw it from.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I didn't do that this time. There is an Instagram account that I actually started following. I made sure to follow them. They started showing up in my feed more often. They are called dad.braids. You can see kind of where this is going, but it is a dad, essentially. They have a Dad Braids Club, which is just a newsletter. Go to their website, sign up for their newsletter on tips. But he does videos about doing your daughter's hair in quick, easy ways that make them look stylish as a way to connect with your daughter. Again, for anybody who is listening, maybe not reading the description, I'll try to put it in there, but dad.braids on Instagram. And it was pretty cool. And he's got some extra equipment, a special type of comb to do parts and some other little tools and things that I don't have, and I'm not sure if I'm going to acquire. But his sort of attitude, I don't even know the guy's actual name. He's just calls himself the Dad Braids Club.
Dad Braids Club.
But his sort of attitude, taking it as an opportunity to connect, taking it as an opportunity where he's not some hairstylist. He was just like, I want to learn to do my daughter's hair. This thing that my wife always does because she knows how to do it because she's a girl kind of thing. And that's how we sort of operate in our house. I can do a ponytail. But I also grew up with a single mom who had long hair down to her waist when I was a kid. And I did learn how to braid when I was a kid with somebody who was older and much more patient. And so I had the opportunity to test it out. And my daughter now has hair below her waist. And so I was like, I'm going to take this opportunity. And so I have, instead of being like, come on, we need to get your hair done. Come on. I gotta, your mom's busy. I've got to do your hair, and turning it in like to a to-do. Again, I've sort of tried to flip that switch. And today, not for the first time, but I have really tried to take care, just not slapping a ponytail in there. Of like, I'm going to get really good at brushing. I'm going to get really good at doing a nice solid ponytail. I'm going to get really good at a braid. I have goals to learn how to do a French braid because ponytail and braid and maybe some pigtails is about the end of my repertoire. But there's some other things that I really want to learn how to do. But by flipping that switch and saying, I'm going to take this as an opportunity I think we can connect on, I actually secretly now have a goal that I am striving to be the preferred parent for hairbrush time. It's not going to be overnight.
No.
But I am trying to make the process fun for me and easy for her so that eventually she just goes, I want dad to do my hair. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that journey is. But tonight I gave her a braid. She was going swimming because my son had soccer at the Y and my mother-in-law was bringing him. And my mother-in-law's like, why don't I just swim with my daughter? And so they went swimming and my wife was like, yeah, we don't want it to get super tangly. It doesn't have to be a French braid, but a braid would be good. And I was like, got it. I can do that. And so I did it and I turned it into a nice, I'm like, it's one of my better braids because I was taking my time. I gave myself time and, had fun with it.
That's cool. Yeah. So I got really into lanyards when I was like 10 years old. So I've got the braid down pat. I can do the standard ponytail. I can do the pigtails. I can do cousin name's hair. There was a while where my 5-year-old wanted to do her older cousin's same hairdo every time. And so I learned that one. So that's kind of my 4. I've attempted a few things. I've tried to do some hair on demand. I've recently learned how to do a bun in the back. Which
LA bun is actually in my repertoire. It's not good, but it's there.
Yeah. So I mean, I really like that goal for you. I might steal that for myself. I don't think I'll ever be the preferred hairstylist, but it is definitely. I'll have to check out that account, Dad.Braids. That sounds
I'm not
fun.
I'm not telling anybody else. I'm telling the whole wide world this goal, but I'm not telling anybody in my immediate family because they don't listen to this podcast this goal. But I'm curious to see if it happens, and I will update the first time she ever asks for me to do her hair.
So funny thing about no one in the immediate family actually listening to this podcast. So normally when I record this podcast, I am upstairs at our dining room table because the lighting's better than for podcasting than down in my office. And my wife will normally go down there and watch TV on that couch. She said she wanted the more comfortable couch. So she is actually up here about 15 feet away from me. I don't even know if she has her headphones in because I can't see. I think she's still awake. But for someone who usually doesn't listen, she now gets to listen to half the podcast only because, of course, she can't hear anything you're saying. So I'm not editing myself by any means. She's going to hear the authentic Ethan half of the pod, but the Alex half is just silence. It's kind of do you I know you don't you two don't watch as much TV together or live current TV that my wife and I watch, but do you watch Ghosts on CBS?
No, I don't.
So Ghosts is a very funny show. There's originally a British version, but the premise is in the pilot a woman inherits a house, like an old house in upstate New York, and in the pilot she slips and falls down the stairs and is legally dead for a minute. So because she was dead for a minute and crossed over and then came to out of the coma, she can now see all of the ghosts who died on the property. Her husband, of course, does not have that ability. So she'll be talking to the ghosts and he just lives in a world where she has conversations with with all these other people and he can only hear half of it. But based on what she reports back, he learns about all of them. So that's what this actually just made me think of. You and I are in an episode of Ghosts and my wife is the husband who just has to sit there and listen. So feels good. Yeah. Should we get into the episode?
Yeah. Almost 20 minutes in, we should probably start talking about the topic at hand. So,
sure.
As I mentioned, it's about getting older, right? And some of the things that come with getting older are physical, right? I wake up some mornings and like my back feels weird. Like I just slept wrong or my neck or something like that. Sometimes I'll get a random ache and pain in a joint. It's not chronic. I don't think it's arthritis, but there are just different things that I go, man, I'm looking into like different pillows. I find myself like Googling what pillow is right for side sleepers or something like that,
Yeah.
I'm like, I really got to optimize this. And these are things like I would sleep like a tangled knot when we first met 18 years ago.
Sure.
Sleep like a tangled knot and have no problems. But, and then there's the other physical stuff. Like you guys can't really see it. It's not super showing, but like I got some gray hairs and I notice more of them when I look in the mirror almost every day. And my wife, because I have still a younger face, my wife likes to point them out. She cuts my hair and she very much likes to point out all the gray hairs that she finds as she finds them. Mostly to take me down a peg for feeling like I look too young. But then we were out and about in Atlanta last week, and we were grabbing a couple of beers, and I got carded. And that you could just see her like steaming a little bit. Like,
I like
that next haircut, buddy. I'm gonna let you have it.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot.
Yeah. So as far as the hair, I'm getting less and less hair on my head, which is unfortunate. I blame, my mother's side of the family for that. If the wives' tale is true, that the gene comes from your mother's father, we'll see. It's starting to look that way.
That my stepmom is a geneticist by trade. And so this was something, my dad. My dad's a listener. My dad has a lot less hair than you. And although you're catching up, but but he would always joke when I was a kid, you're going to look like me one day. And my stepmom did correct him. Now, there are some, it is not as black and white as just it comes from the X chromosome in a male given by their mother. There are some genes and patterns, and it's, of course, way more complicated than that, as to what creates male pattern baldness. But it is, at least, as she told me 20 years ago or more, 90-10 mother's side of the family. And so, but by the same accord, that doesn't necessarily mean that every single member of your family is going to suffer from it the same way, because they can get different genes and different things. My dad's younger brother has kept his hair a lot longer. I haven't seen him in a bit. I don't know how much he's got now, but he's in his late 60s, if not 70s. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. I've accepted my fate. I was really just going with where I tend to notice the grays, oddly, is mostly on my facial hair. For the most part, this might be thinning, but my redness remains. It's the occasional like white hair in the middle of my mustache where I'm just kind of saying, well, I can't possibly go to a work meeting with that there. So pull out the tweezer and take it away to just make myself look a little better. But, that's where I tend to notice the grays. Something you did say, though, earlier, which my wife can't hear, is the mention of just waking up with some pain. And, for me, I think it's a good week if I don't have my one morning or one day a week where just a part of my back just hurts out of nowhere. I could be having an amazing day. I can be in the middle of a great moment. And then boom, a spot in my back, just this terrible pain hits. And it's, that's that one this week. And that's definitely something that hit in the 30s, because that was never, ever a thing in my 20s.
No, if I ever had a pain like that, it was like something is really wrong.
Yeah, time to go to the hospital.
Oh, maybe I sat at my desk too long.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a segue to another big part of like the aging process, right? As you get into your mid-30s and even older, you're probably more sedentary, right?
Sure.
Especially if you have kids. You might be working a desk job like Ethan and I do. You might not be moving around this much, right? There are plenty of things that if my life was a little different, let's say I didn't elect to go to the gym on weekday mornings. Let's say I didn't have a dog that I walked for 20 minutes every morning before everybody else in my house gets up. Let's say my kid didn't live within walking or biking distance of her school and I didn't take her, that I was just driving her. If you eliminate those things like steadily working out, walking, and biking, my activity would be way lower forced, right? Versus like when we were in college and we were walking to classes and walking to restaurants and walking this place, that place, and the other. And sure, we drove, but then we'd like go out and we walk from bar to bar, and those steps add up, right? I'm not saying that calorically it cancels out what we were consuming, but we
No.
were just moving a lot more. We were standing up, walking around at parties for hours on end, what have you.
Right.
There's just not nearly as much of that in our lifestyle. And it is one of the biggest factors that contributes to the feeling old, to the feeling like you don't move as well. You're not as flexible as you used to be, as we will explicitly talk about later. The dad bod, right?
Mhm.
It is what leads to that, because it's pretty unnatural for someone to start moving a lot less and instantaneously like change their diet to
Sure.
match that movement. They keep
Sure.
the diet patterns because that's the food they're comfortable with. That's what they've been doing. And then they move a lot less. And if you don't move your joints, move your muscles, move your body, contributes to weight gain, but it also just contributes to like those movements getting harder when you do try to do them.
Absolutely. Just simple things, just some of it is applicable, attributable to, some weight gain, but just the ability to stretch as well as I used to is gone. Do you remember in middle school and high school, we'd have to do, I think they were called presidential fitness or something. I don't know. I had to do it in my school.
Something like
where,
that.
like,
Yeah.
you stretch, and depending on how far you could reach, you gotta score. I always was super flexible to the point where, I was the guy who could stand flat-footed, legs together, and touch palms to the ground. Now, part of that is because I've got a torso that I think is larger than my legs, hence my, vertically challenged life. But I definitely can't do that anymore, or the ability. And, I feel it actually most Sunday mornings when I do parent accompaniment with my daughter in gymnastics, and her coach, she's over there doing seal stretches where she's clapping her hands and she's touching her feet to the back of her head, and then looks at me, and I go, what do you want me to do? This isn't for me. This is for her.
Yeah.
And but anyway, it's just kind of a situation where I really notice it more, other than in weight gain, unless I'm really, being proactive, is just the flexibility. And that hurts a little. Literally hurts. So
yeah, I have a confession to make, and that is I did not have the same childhood as you did on those exams or those things. I have never been able to touch my toes in my life.
Okay.
I've gotten close when, regular stretching, things like that. I'll be the first to admit that, like, when I'm crunched for time at the gym, which feels like pretty much every time, stretching is the last thing. Like, I don't have the consistency that I do with cardio or weightlifting. And it's one of those kind of goals of mine that every year on my like fitness goals, I go, be able to touch my toes by the end of the year. And then it just moves to the next year because I did not put in the work. But where I see it on my flexibility, because I'm not like inflexible overall, it is that specific movement for whatever reason. But I notice it in all places, like in my rotation ability and like my ability, like when I'm on a bike and I'm looking over my shoulder for traffic, right? My rotation ability isn't what it used to be. When I was a kid, I couldn't touch my toes, but when I would swing a golf club, my natural rotation of the golf club and how I got a lot of power is like right now my hands, you can see them in the background, would kind of be parallel, but like I could get the club perpendicular to the ground on my backside, rotating back around, right? That far. And I'm like, and I've lost that. I'm in a normal enough range, and I work on that a little bit because it's obviously something that gets undone by a lot of desk sitting, which I think is honestly the big culprit. You kind of sit over, bend your back this way, and punch forward. But that is where I really feel it.
Sure.
So I hear it, and that is also where I go, okay, I need to work on this, because I also think, like we were talking about with you and like the muscle memory of getting back in the gym last week. I think the same thing can be true for this flexibility. I'm like, I just need to make it a habit so that my body goes, oh yeah, I remember how to do that.
Yeah. And, part of it is if I really worked at it, in getting back to that flexibility, I know my body can do it because there are times when when I feel like I've pulled something and it really kind of hurts. And I will ask my wife, I will get straight, I will bend down, and I will ask her, hey, please push my back down to the point where I am touching the ground because I need to get that stretch going. But I'd love to get back to the point where I can do that on my own. You feel it in the hamstrings, and it can be excruciating, but in a good way, kind of like how a deep tissue massage, you kind of want to scream, but then afterward, you're so happy you did it. That is how I feel sometimes when I ask her to push down my back. So it'd be great to be able to get back there, but like how I used to be.
I have a tip that could work for you without having to solicit your wife for help there. One thing you could do is do it in socks. Do bare feet or socks, just not shoes because it'd be uncomfortable. But take your fingers and slip them up under, bend your knees, slip them up underneath your toes, and then try to straighten your legs.
Right? I see what you mean.
So you're standing on your hands. I have reactions turned on. I forgot about that. I was gonna. Okay. I had meant to throw that in earlier, but I could do all sorts of stuff. Got the new Mac OS. I could throw some.
Oh, look at you!
Things in there. But I didn't realize it was going to take this and throw a thumbs up in there. But now it's not going to recognize
I hate when that happens because it'll always happen in a weird moment. On Monday,
I was okay, got it, and it's like boop, boop,
boop. On Monday, I didn't even do it fully. I was talking to my therapist during my lunch break at work on my phone, and I think I just did this, and next thing you know, it's the thumbs up thing. That is what happened. And it's like I'm pouring my heart out here, and my effing phone thinks that's great to hear. No, I don't like it, but that was a very old an old thing to complain about right now. But so one thing that actually for the millions of you watching, you've seen me just crushing this cup of water. I've now emptied it twice. That's another thing I've noticed about getting old is my need to hydrate when I have food that is the slightest bit saltier than normal.
Yeah.
And it is the amount of water that
you guys might have been thinking that I was drinking a beer. I have like a portrait mode screen thing on, but it's just it's spring water. It's a spring water bottle. Yeah. Our house sitter left a pack of these in the fridge. I don't know why. We have a reverse osmosis filter that makes our water taste like bottled water, but we've been taking them, refilling them with that filter and sticking them back in the fridge to have cold drinking water because our ice maker's broken. Anyway,
there you go.
That's a whole we have sidebarred.
Yes, we have. But it's related too. It's a change in our body from getting older. My ability to tolerate salt.
Yeah, the ability to tolerate salt, and it kind of segues into more drinking behaviors, both good and bad and whatever. But I have found, and I know, as I've mentioned before on previous podcasts, especially ones around mental health, like I was diagnosed a couple years ago with ADHD, and that has helped clarify how I have a different effect with caffeine. Like I could have double shot espresso right now and go to sleep. Wouldn't affect me in the same way it affects normal people. But getting through the day, I find that I tend to drink more caffeine. Like I didn't drink caffeine really until college. And it was energy drinks every now and then when I was waking up at 4 a.m. to drive from Florida to North Carolina to go home at the end of the semester. But it wasn't like I needed caffeine every morning to get going. And now it is really I have to have a couple cups of coffee a day. And I know you can wean yourself off of this, but I have to have a couple cups of coffee a day just to get to a baseline of I'm not going to have a headache. Right? Just basic. And then I might have a couple more on top of that to just give me a little pep to get through my afternoon meetings or something. So that, and then on the flip side, when we were on vacation, and I think I mentioned this last week, I drank more, right? Having 2 or 3 drinks while out with my wife. You know, we were vacationing, renting a house in an area that was walking distance from some restaurants. So some nights we would just walk and we'd have 2, 3, 4 drinks or whatever because nobody was driving, or we would call, you know, we'd call an Uber because it was short into town, whatever. And after a couple of days of that, I was like, I felt bloated. Like I never got drunk to the point where I had a hangover or anything, but I just felt like, just icky after having a few drinks a couple times in a week. And, you know, sometimes I will, you know, go out and have a few drinks, but that's like a once a week thing. And then maybe I have 1 drink a couple other times a week. And that is explicitly not how we acted in college. Like,
no,
I don't have to get into specifics, but like, we were in a fraternity, we were in college, and we acted like it. So it's just, and then we got up and we did it again.
And and on very little sleep, to the point where, you know, the fact that, and I will get slightly more specific, the fact that we would regularly 4 nights in a row from Thursday through Sunday, you know, be out having a good time, consuming alcohol until about 2, getting home at 3, and then waking up at 6:30, fully ready to go to start the day, whether it be our internship class. Then we would just do it all again. And usually on Monday, you know, we'd get a little tired. So it's, just a few drinks for Monday Night Football. And then, you know, that's all we're going to do, to the point where we could get ready for the Tuesday Night Grove, where really I would say the tamest night was probably Wednesdays, where maybe we had a beer in the pool at our house after we got done with class. And you know, to the point where 2 or 3 beers at the pool was the off night from drinking. And again, I sound like we are alcoholics during this. No, we were just 20 years old. 21. Sure. For the sake of the story, 21. And
I think the statute of limitations is passed on that one, unfortunately, for our age. But it was definitely, it's definitely different. Like looking back and going, I couldn't do a week. I couldn't do a week. Yeah, several in a row. And it was crazy. But I think some of the effects past, like the consuming more caffeine, a lot less alcohol, all that kind of stuff, you know, because that continued into, you know, our 20s, where it was like I wasn't doing that 5 nights a week or something. But living in New York City as I did straight after college, you lived in LA and then fairly quickly moved to DC. It's like we were in areas where it was plenty of things going on, right? It was very easy without children to go out on Thursday night, go out on Friday night, and go out on Saturday night and kind of string those together as well. But some of the other things is just like, we are now in a different spot than we were then professionally, right? Sure. We are in bigger boy jobs, right? Than the entry level jobs where we were just supposed to show up and sort of meet the tasks and do a certain set of things. We have more responsibilities, and that comes with its own set of stresses. Right. Sure. And then we have the stress of kids doing something as silly as getting into a fight over a milk cup, or getting into a fight over which of the 2 Play-Doh sets that are out they get to use, and having to set ground rules about sharing, and stresses, you know, as I mentioned, you know, like we have had plenty of times where, you know, we had some times earlier this calendar year before we started recording that I would have had story times a lot like yours, where it was just like we were renovating our bathroom and the kids were having themselves a day and work was going crazy, and just like everything where it was just like, I felt like, can I just get a second to breathe?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I on a mission to try and make sure I get enough sleep. So the answer wasn't the whole like, let's just stay up late and screw tomorrow, Alex, about this.
Right.
And it was that helped. And I'm going to get into that in a second. But like, the stress is higher. The movement is lower. The like functional performance is lower. And yeah, there's some appearance things. Like I see lines on my forehead that didn't used to exist. Right. And we're all getting them. But there's just, those kind of signs. And I think
and another thing on that, just in the being cognizant of preventative measures. So for example, if I know that I'm going to be going out, this Saturday we're going to a wedding. And so there's going to be a higher chance of more drinks consumed than I'm normally used to. So I'm probably going to have a lot more water, which than I would have, 15 years ago. I'm pretty much at the one-in-one situation, or the fact that, today I worked from home around a doctor's appointment. So rather than go on the elliptical, which I have done the last 12 work days or 13 work days, I jogged again today. But it's been a while since I jogged. And I remembered that 7 years ago, when I had jogged for the first time in a while, it resulted in a stress fracture in each knee. So what did I do tonight before I recorded, after I weighed myself? I thought to myself, you know what? My knees don't hurt, but I do have this Voltaren from when I had some stress pain a few months ago. I'm just going to rub it onto my knees as a preventative measure, just to ensure that my tendons don't hurt tomorrow. And it's things like that where I never would have thought to do it even 6 years ago. It's just a lot has changed when your first digit starts with a 3. So.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into more of a hopeful tomorrow kind of message, because I do think you can fight back, prevent and fight back, right? Like if you really care about the gray hairs, you can get some Just for Men.
Sure.
I'm going to judge you, but my opinion doesn't matter, right? Sure. If you're in Ethan's shoes and you want to explore Rogaine or any of the other multitude of options for hair.
Why are you just assuming I do that?
I'm not assuming you do that. I'm saying that you are the target demographic for those companies.
I go Kirkland brand.
There you go. And it shows.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
But you can fight back a little bit on the physical side. I mean, this isn't going to be some revelation, and I'm not going to harp on it, but like exercising, stretching, the things we've talked about, like putting in the work. Like you can't keep muscle like you used to as you age. It's harder when you're not moving, you're not using it. It's harder to keep muscle. Go in, do resistance training. It doesn't have to be like you don't have to be training to be Mr. Olympia level resistance training, doing something, even if it's just a total body thing 3 days a week. That's what most experts say is like good enough. Get some cardio in, do stretching, do these mobility things, and like start with something, right? Because I think that's like the biggest. If I had advice to my slightly younger self, it would be start some of these habits one at a time, right? You don't have to revamp your diet, start stretching, start moving, start resistance training, start doing more cardio, start getting daily steps in outside of your, like, that's a huge list. And if you take that list and go, I'm going to start all that tomorrow, you're going to be overwhelmed. And the stress that you're feeling is not going to go anywhere, because you're going to have another thing that's stressing you out and is slightly relieving the stress, but not as much as it adds. So like pick one of those things and try to do it for a month. And then once you've done it for a month, maybe it's a habit and you add in another habit and you sort of keep that list and you go, okay, I am going to get to the point where I am going for a jog or doing some form of cardio twice a week, 3 times a week, or I'm going for a 30-minute walk every day. Once you've done that, add some resistance training. Once you've done that, right? You guys get it. And then, like, you know, making sure that, you know, we've said it, it's a natural occurrence, but like hydrating and reducing your alcohol intake is a big thing. Like, if you are someone who still drinks a lot of alcohol, I'm not here to tell you to be a teetotaler, to give it up, but it'll make you feel a lot younger if you drink more water and less beer. And it's becoming a lot less taboo to, I feel like, in the general zeitgeist, to like turn down a drink. And so they're making tons of, you know, I was out and looking at a menu and there were 3, you know, name brand non-alcoholic beers on there now, non-alcoholic seltzers, right? It used to be O'Doul's, and you'd kind of laugh and go, who drinks that?
Athletic Brewing tastes really good. I bought a 6-pack after listening to the Dailies podcast on just on the founder and how hard it was for him to find a brewmaster that was willing to do it because of the reputation of an O'Doul's, just how non-alcoholic beer doesn't taste good. But he found one guy that was really willing. Well, it got to the point where he would put out, you know, a job application for brewmasters, being like opening up a new brewery. And it wasn't until they came for the interview that he said it's a non-alcoholic beer, and they would just walk away after the whole interview. And then finally, a guy said, "You know what? We can do this. We can work together." And honestly, it tasted great. And so I have that 6. I have the other 5 of the 6-pack. Because I know at some point we're going to have somebody over here at one point who's not going to want to drink, but is not going to want water, is going to be, you know, wants to participate. So I want to make sure they feel comfortable. And, you know, another thing you mentioned is, you know, sometime there, you know, especially in times of high stress, I might drink more often, but as you grow up, you ideally will have a more sophisticated palate. And you don't have to drink as much for the same effect. You can get better tasting beer that has a higher alcohol content, drink one of them, get the buzz you want, and it's not going to break your body. Because ultimately you're having one beer versus, you know, the 6-pack of, the Circle K by Campus. It was essentially it came to like 50 cents a PBR, like a 6-pack of PBR for $3, something like that. Yeah, and we would drink them all 6, and we'd feel, and it would feel like that.
Palette of beer.
Yes,
is how I would describe that. Yeah, and it was, you know, it was a lot of that, and I agree with you. And I've become, I'll be the first to say, like, as someone who homebrews as a hobby, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I got a home brewing gift card for my birthday because I have not done it in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I have not tried Athletic Brewing. I may give it a try at some point. I am perfectly okay and don't feel ostracized by drinking water. So I will just drink water, right? Like for me, I'm like, some people I bet they taste good. Yeah, and I'm not judging people that want to have a non-alcoholic beer. It's not that. It's my own personal reservation of just going, water costs less. Mm-hmm. Like, beer is a vehicle of taste, but also for that buzz, you know, even just to have one. And so I'm very much like, I'm not saying I'll never try it. I just haven't gotten around to it because it has not been something that I wanted to do. But speaking of hobbies, that is another thing that I have on my list of like things that you can do to combat aging, and carving out time for your own hobbies. And I have not been good at that. This has been a somewhat difficult period of parenting. We are moving, having a toddler, it was a while of just like, it felt like we had to acquiesce to my daughter's wants and needs. And my son was just along for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
And he has grown into his own person with his own thoughts, his own desires, his own wants, as people do, right? This is not like, I didn't see this coming out of nowhere. The kid developed a will.
Right.
But at the same time, it means like, well, now both kids want to do gymnastics, so we got to get them both ready. We got to make sure they have all their stuff. Both kids my son's going to soccer, my daughter's doing ballet, and they're constantly asking to do more. They want to have play dates with friends. They want to do this, that, and the other. And it's very easy to put aside the beer brewing that I have not done in a year.
Right.
It's very easy to put aside the golfing that I haven't done at least in 6 months.
Really?
And for all of you that are warm weather or cold weather folks, I live in Florida. It's not because of the weather. It has just been time and getting out there and doing it and feeling like I have the free time. As I mentioned before, one of the big contributors to this was my wife's work situation, where she had just taken on so many contracting jobs to fill up her 40 hours that when she looked up, she had 60. And it felt like there was a lot of like daddy daycare on the weekends, where now we've got some time and she has more flexibility to be like, hey, yeah, she's the one who gave me the brewing gift card along with a weekend of my choice this month. It was time box, but I had to do it this month to brew. And so not this coming weekend, but the next weekend, I'm going to brew on that Saturday and watch the Masters. Pick that Saturday on purpose. But, I'm like, I need a daytime sporting event. Aha, Augustus got me.
There you go.
And then my mom got me a summer membership to the local golf course.
There you go.
And as I shared with you, I took my daughter for the first time to the junior academy this Sunday, to the junior academy at our golf course. And so the idea here is if I can get one or both kids involved in this, and I need to parent and I want to golf, I can do what my dad did and take the kid golfing.
Yeah. I have that same goal. And actually, what's funny is I mentioned on our last episode that with all the commuting, I've been going through other podcasts faster. So I've been going through the backlog of ours. And I actually just listened to the episode where you had said, and it was about a year ago, where we had talked about looking into how cool it would be to have golf club memberships. And you had actually said, oh yeah, this is the local one has this much. There's a summer only, membership. And just to literally, I felt like you were talking about it on Tuesday and now it is Thursday and you've got the membership, even though in real time it was a year ago.
Yeah, it was the present that my mom got me for my birthday last year. And I did utilize it a lot last summer. And so I am hoping to utilize it again. And that's why I said maybe 6 months, because it runs like summer is defined as like May 1st to October 31st. So it's a very long period. And so I was able to utilize it for a good amount of time. But that is something that I want to, get back into those things. And I've started exploring what it might look like, to find like there's some social golf leagues or something like that.
Yeah.
Different things to sort of, once I start swinging the clubs again, because we had this plan. I was going to take my daughter to the junior academy, and then we were going to have some lunch, and then we were going to go out to the range because she still wanted to. And then the sky opened up, and so I never actually got to swing a golf club last weekend. I just watched her. which is great.
Great
She
shot,
enjoyed
though.
it. She had a good time. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
she had quite a few duds, but it was her first
Sure.
time, and she was really enjoying it. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of like my son with soccer today, who kept picking the ball up and placing it where he wanted before kicking it. It's about having fun. I'm not about to be a stickler and not about to comment on her swing when I'm like, mine's not there right now.
Sure, yeah. My daughter's been asking when we can get back out on the links. So, now that we are weather dependent here in DC, so now that it's getting a little nicer, I'm gonna try to find some time for her and I to do that. But
yeah. And I think the last thing before we get into working on the dad bod, because I know this is long, so I'll try to make this quick. And
you're good.
PSA, from a health perspective, you guys, in addition to all the things we talk about that you can do yourself, it's time to start looking at the checklists and figuring out what routine checkups you need that aren't just your annual physical. And I'm going to be honest and say that some of you out there probably not even doing that, but screenings for different things.
Sure.
And if you're feeling extra sluggish, let's say you are checking all the right boxes, your nutrition's on point, your fitness is on point, your sleep's on point, and you're still feeling sluggish, like getting blood work done to check your testosterone levels, because they can start dipping in some men during this time, during this time of life. There are all sorts of things that blood work can reveal a lot of other more serious things than, I don't have the libido I once did, but
sure.
Just making sure you do those routine checkups and actually get on them, because it's a prevention's worth a pound of cure, just like with Ethan's knee cream.
Yeah. I will say, if it weren't for actually going to a general physician a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have learned that, my calcium seemed a little high. And then I started seeing an endocrinologist, and now I've got my calcium under control. And I mentioned earlier how I worked from home today around a doctor's appointment. It's because it turns out today was my annual cardiologist appointment that I forgot about. And, surprisingly, with all the stress, my heart's doing fine. So, that was when she said, when she said everything looks good, I said, "You sure?" There's no way with everything going on in my life that's
just like it's been working overtime.
Yeah. So, on that note, since I just delved into my bod a bit, I alluded to the fact that 13 days in a row I was on, or 13 work days in a row I was on an elliptical, and up until today, I because I jogged, but I had mentioned that one of the I guess silver lining of having to go back to work every day is that I finally joined the gym at my department's building, because if I'm going to be there every day, I've decided I listened to an old episode of ours, made working out a non-negotiable for myself. If I'm going to work, I'm going to work out. It has been my motto every day that I've been to the office. And so, like I mentioned, I am on my third week. Tomorrow will be the completion of my fifth work week of working out. And when on March 13th, which was before I started going back, I was 202 pounds, as I mentioned. Then last week when I weighed in, I was 197.8. And then today, when I weighed in full nude, before we recorded, I was 194.6. So I have I've lost 6 pounds in 3 weeks, which at my goal of doing minus 2 pounds a week has actually been working. I've also been very diligent in my calorie counting. I have blown past my calorie goal, I will say, every day, because I do have it set to losing 2 pounds a week. But as you and I actually discussed on about a year ago, which I just listened to, the visual, I'm always going to go past my calories because it is honestly too low. But the lower number will mean that I will blow past a lower number. So it's actually seeing that number being lower, it's keeping my blowing past a little more in check. Whereas if I had a higher number, I know I'd probably blow past it too, but it would be more. So I am not eating at a at an unhealthy calorie intake, but mentally I am trying to, but realistically I'm just not going to get there. So, it actually has been working because, I'm still having roughly 2,000 calories a day, even though my goal is 1,540 per my app, but I'm exercising and I'm working on my intuitive eating, and I'm trying to put all these things together that we had just discussed, not trying to do all at once, but because I have done them separately in the past, I'm trying to remember how to bring them together. So I'm getting the progress I want. And I know that because something happened 48 hours ago when I was at the gym at work on Tuesday. I was in the gym in between sets in front of a mirror, and I noticed I could make my titties dance again after just from 2 weeks of chest workout. You can kind of see a bit there with the flexing, but I'm not Terry Crews right now. I don't think
Sure.
But I'm getting there. I'm getting back to high school football. Ethan can make his titties dance by standing still, and that's really all I ever wanted. So
there you go.
I'm getting there. So I have successfully worked on the dad bod for 3 weeks, and I'm hope I can do it again for a fourth.
Yeah. So last week I hadn't weighed in, right? Just because I had just gotten back from traveling right before we recorded, hadn't been the first thing on my mind. So when I weighed in before my trip, it was 177.4. When I got back from my trip, 179.2. So 1.8 pound increase. Let's call it 2. I will take, for essentially a 2-week vacation, I will take a 2 pound increase 8 days a week.
That's great.
That can be chalked up to plenty of that can be chalked up to a variety of things, just eating a different diet, whatever. You kind of one big poop away from regulating. But then, because I weigh myself more than just once a week, I weighed myself on Monday. Or no, I weighed myself on Tuesday after having several different birthday meals. I had a meal with my family and then a meal with my mom. And they were pretty heavy, right? I was tracking my calories and trying to be mindful of what I was eating. And I go out to lunch with my mom and I ordered a chicken sandwich. It was really yummy. And some empanadas. It was fine and everything. But I ate it all and I was very satiated and very full. And then my mom had already called the restaurant and preordained a dessert. And so I got a cheesecake. And for probably the first time in my life, I was really proud of myself. I didn't finish it. They gave me a box and I brought the dessert home. And I ate some of it. But that afternoon, when she got home from school, I offered it to my daughter. I was like, hey, you want some cheesecake? And she was like, yeah. And she didn't eat all of it. And she was going to save some of it for her brother. And then by last night, it had been a few days. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to have this quarter of a cheesecake piece.
Sure.
But this week, so I had ballooned up to 180.6 after the birthday weekend. I think did more damage than the vacation. But weighing in today, I was 178.2. So if we start at 177.4, just to remind people of the numbers, I'm not trying to make you do math. 178.2. I'm 0.8 pounds, about a pound up from where I started several weeks ago before my vacation. Again, I'll take that. Right now,
Sure.
Unlike Ethan, I'm not explicitly trying to be in a deficit. I may, by next week, have changed that. I think I would like to get into a cutting again. But right now I am really enjoying this period of pretty much staying somewhere between 175 and 179 pretty regularly whenever I weigh in. having a consistent like 2100 calories, not regulating that based on my movement, and just like having that being my baseline calories every day. And like today, I was pretty close to the number, but I also had 800 active calories. So I'm like, I was probably in a pretty decent deficit today. And so that can happen. People say you can't work out to lose weight. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. But if your calories are dialed into your maintenance calories and then you work out extra, yeah, you can absolutely like move your way into losing weight.
Yeah. And I would say, the biggest thing for me is I've, in an older episode, we talked about finding something to eat every day can be boring. But if it's something you like to eat every day, it's really not bad. And knowing that my tendency is I know that because I've done it my whole life, and I know you're not supposed to, but honestly, it's my favorite meal of the day, dinner. I tend to eat the most at night. So what have I done every day since going back to the office? I make myself some cottage cheese with everything bagel seasoning, but it's actually mostly chia seeds to both fill me up and have a lot of fiber. And since they have no flavor, if you put like 2 tablespoons of chia seed and a teaspoon of everything bagel seasoning, and honestly just tastes like everything bagel seasoning. So
texture's right there.
Yeah. So I do that. And then I have a Granny Smith apple. And if the bananas are ripe, I take a banana. And if there's no bananas, I have green grapes. So honestly, all I'm eating during the day, aside from my caffeine intake, is cottage cheese and 2 fruits. And honestly, I'm really not that hungry during the day. It is just it is limiting what I'm doing during the day. And then when I get home and I have dinner, I have been doing my best to be pretty cognizant about intuitive eating and not overdoing it. And, there's like, my plate, and then I might take a nibble on if the amount that my kids leave over, I don't feel like saving, or in a certain situation where if my 2-year-old puts pesto on her pasta, like we can't send her leftovers with her for lunch tomorrow because pasta has pine nuts and it's an entirely nut-free situation. So what am I gonna do? I'm just gonna eat that little extra pasta, whatever. It's marginal at that point. But I do that because I know I've really limited myself during the day in anticipation. And actually, I keep referencing our old episodes because I guess time is a flat circle, but it's calorie budgeting. We actually had a whole episode about, hey, I'm going to a wedding this weekend, so I'm probably going to eat and drink a lot. So maybe I have less earlier in the day, and that's just what I do. So
yeah, and I mean it. My initial reaction is like, I can't imagine not having breakfast because that's me. But there's a lot of like, should you eat more calories for breakfast? Should you eat more for dinner? And on a granular day-to-day basis, maybe it makes some difference, but like it's not going to have some major negative health impact there. And the quality of the food that you eat early or late makes a big difference too. Like if you're eating a bunch of strips of like fatty bacon and having a bowl of high sugar cereal or something, and the quality of the calories isn't there, but you had a big breakfast, versus like, well, now I'm not going to have as much chicken breast and broccoli for dinner. I'm going to have a smaller portion of that, right? Like that's not the goal there. That's not the healthy thing. So anyway,
I've never been super hungry when I woke up. Like that's never just been who I am. And when I do go out and ball out at like brunch, or we go get a nice breakfast, I wish I could say that I was less hungry at dinner, but I don't know what it is about dinner. I'm just always super hungry at dinner. So knowing that, I have to find a way to, combat it. So
yeah. I mean, and you're not alone. I don't think you're the common. I don't think you're the rule. but I know enough people that operate exactly like you that, it's just, it's as long as you're tracking your calories, you're fine.
Yeah. That was quite a bit tonight. And again, I'm sorry I was late, but to the millions of you that stuck with us for these 70 minutes, thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us as always. We will be back next week. I'm Ethan. That's Alex. And we have apparently known each other for half our lives.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.